Hello there. What is going on, everybody? We're talking about today Star Wars Armada and top 10 ships that we never got under Fantasy Flight games. This is similar to a list I did recently for X-Wing, and I wanted to do one for Armada as well. As you may or may not know, Armada was completely drugged through the mud and canceled by Atomic Mass Games. But before they did that, Fantasy Flight had made a lot of stuff for Star Wars Armada, and we didn't get everything. There was definitely some things that were planned before they turned their worlds of Star Wars miniatures games upside down by moving everything around between studios, and I wanted to do my top 10 things that we never did see under Fantasy Flight that maybe it would have been nice to see if, of course, the changeover had never happened and we were still getting Fantasy Flight games today, maybe things that we might have seen in the meantime or might still come out. I am sticking primarily to canon ships in this list. I am going with things that I think are kind of like, at least in some ways, realistic, things that they might have actually done. And a lot of that we'll look at things that were canon at the time of the changeover and also things that have been canon since. Again, there have been a lot of new media and shows and things like that that have either brought old things into new canon or shown an extra bright light on certain things. And then there'll also be some things that they just missed and never got around to that they probably would have. Now, I'm also focusing only on the capital ships. In this one, I'm not necessarily focusing on the fighters that would have made it on there, or the squadrons that would have made it to Star Wars Armada. That one might be a different video. Maybe we'll see. But we're focusing on the capital ships that we'd like to see. Also, we are doing a new round of the giveaway right now. If you want to have a chance to enter to win it, you just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. And that's for a $25 Amazon gift card that you can put towards a gaming expansion of your choice, provided it exists on Amazon. All right, so here we go. We're starting our countdown at number 10. Number 10 is going to be the modified extra-large Gozanti that we saw in Star Wars Rebels, otherwise known as the IVG-55 surveillance vessel. This was a pretty cool vessel that we got in just one episode of Rebels, and I think it was mentioned in maybe one or two other places since then. But it was a type of Gozanti-sized vessel that had extra dishes on there, a lot of extra communication, this huge radar array, and could have allowed you to have maybe a flotilla or even a small ship. It could have gone. It was a lot larger than a regular Gozanti, but not like that much larger. So it probably would have still been a flotilla, but it could have been a different type of flotilla for the Empire. It doesn't necessarily have to have scatter. These guys weren't scattering, it was kind of sitting put and spying. It was a long-range kind of spy vessel. It might have been a speed 1, like a ship that didn't really move, didn't really do much, but was like supporting from a distance. And it could have been an interesting way, and I think it would have fit really well with the rules. And it was a canon ship that got introduced, when FFG was still making Armada. So I always thought it would have been a prime candidate for an Imperial ship to show up in a new flotilla for the Empire. So I thought that would have been a pretty cool one. Moving on to number 9. This one is a little out of left field, and so give me some time to justify it. By the way, before I get to number 9, I want you to let me know some of the things that you agree with and disagree with down in the comments section below for this list. I want to know your thoughts on this next one specifically. This is the Corona-class armed frigate. Hondo Ohnaka's pirate fleet could have made it to Armada? Question mark, question mark. No, I'm not suggesting that we get a pirate class or a non-aligned class or a mercenary class or a whole new faction or anything like that. I'm talking about Hondo showing up in this game with a multi-faction pack. Maybe these guys could work for any faction, and maybe they were expensive. Maybe they were even a little more expensive than need be, but it would have been a cool way to bring a multi-faction pack into the game. It would have been a cool way to do something a little out of the ordinary. They were kind of on the larger sides, so not necessarily large, but I think they could have fit as another medium ship, which could have worked pretty interesting, depending on a lot of builds. Of course, if you're making it to be 4 potential factions, if it could work for anybody, might not have been 4 factions, might have just been Clone Wars era factions, because again, these did exist during the Clone Wars, and we don't really see them during the Galactic Civil War. So maybe it would have been a Clone Wars era Hondo that could have just been, hey, he works for the Republic or the Separatists only. He might have even had a specialized Hondo crew card or maybe even a Hondo like weapons team or support team or something like that, a different way to run Hondo. Or maybe even a Hondo commander that has to go on board this ship. Again, we're getting a little bit crazy out there, but there's a lot of interesting things they could have done with something like this without necessarily bringing in a new faction. I don't think that's what they would have to do with this at all. I think you could have found a very easy way to do a standalone multi-ship pack that could have worked for multiple factions, and I think this is a great way to do that. Only problem with it is it definitely was based off of old school 1950s era UFOs, and that might have seemed a little too campy for modern Armada audiences. However, I think if you had released it as part of a wave that had more recognizable ships, it would have still sold very, very well and would have appealed greatly to the Armada community if it had some, really good design and fit into the game mechanics really well. And it was a canon ship that is a little different and is kind of outside the norm, and I think that could be pretty cool. Moving on to number 8. This one's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm going with the Republic Arquitens. I put this one lower on the list, and it was a really tough decision for me to decide where to put this on the list, because this is one of my most wanted ships, but at the same time we already have an Arquitens. So should I waste a top 3 spot for a ship that we already have in game? And when I say we already have it in game, we already have the Imperial Arquitens. We don't have the Republic Arquitens, and maybe the model would have been the same. It might have just been a different paint job. Again, this is but this serves so many purposes for them to have. If Fantasy Flight had actually done another Clone Wars wave, I am sure we would have gotten Republic Arquitens, primarily because Arquitens are out of stock and we're selling out like crazy, and one of the most in-demand ships. Even after reprints, they would instantly sell out because it's a great ship. Works really, really, really well for Star Wars Armada, and this is a ship that definitely should see more play, and of course it would work really, really well with the Republic. It's just it should have been in a 2-ship pack. We should have gotten a little box with 2 Republic Arquitens. It would have taken pressure off of all those Imperial players. They're like, hey, we don't have all these Republic players buying up our Arquitens and painting them red. You can actually have your own. And you could have even done a multi-faction pack in a way, because you could have put some new titles like we've got. We also have Arquitens in The Mandalorian, and so you could have done a title for Moff Gideon's specific Arquitens, which was technically a slightly different model, but I don't know if they would have done a whole nother model for that, so they could have just incorporated the benefits of that model into the title, since there was only one of them on screen. They could have done some things like that too. It could have been a pretty big deal of a pack. It could have been a beefy pack with extra cards and variants and things like that. Would have been an awesome expansion. Would have loved to have seen it. But it ranks lower on the list because technically we already have an Arquitens in the game. So, okay. That's why I bumped it down a little bit. Moving up to number 7. Now this one we're jumping into some more newer canon stuff, and this one is a little bit of a stretch, but hear me out. This is the Defender-class cruiser. The first one we saw of these was the Vesper in Ahsoka. And this is sort of a Mon Calamari design, sort of inspired by an MC40 kind of era. When the trailer first out, some people thought these might have been MC30s and then MC40s, and it's a Defender-class cruiser. Certainly draws inspiration from some of the EU and Legends Mon Calamari designs. It is a Mon Calamari design for sure, but these are New Republic ships. These were new cruisers that had just come out in the time of The Mandalorian. So you might be saying, wait, if this is New Republic, why would it be a Rebel ship? Why would it be in Star Wars Armada? Well, I've got good reason. There's precedent for that because you already have the Starhawk. You already have the Starhawk as a Rebel ship, and that's even newer than these. It comes out later in the timeline than these do. So, or in the same time era, but technically, you know, they were like new at the Battle of Jakku, which had not happened yet at the time of this. So there you go. So where do we go from here? Right? What are these going to do? Well, for one, I don't think they're going to do. I don't think they were going to do sequel factions for Armada. They could have at some point, but there's just not enough First Order stuff, and there probably wasn't going to be enough First Order stuff to justify a faction for the First Order for many, many, many years. So I'd say, you know, like they've already drawn the precedent of saying, hey, the Starhawk exists. It's a New Republic ship exclusively. The Rebellion never used New Republic. Or the Rebellion never used the Starhawk, rather. So New Republic stuff can just go in Rebellion. And I think that's fair. The Empire has this 30-year time period of ships that it can pull from. How come the Rebellion only gets like a 4-year time period? Like, let's let the Rebellion have a couple extra years in the grace period in the other direction, too. That's fine. It works. And it would be like a medium ship. The Rebels could really use another medium ship. You know, it'd be kind of cool. So I think it works. I think it's and they're not like super like militant cruisers. They're like multi-purpose ships, so that would allow it to not necessarily be overpowered, which is a good thing. All right. That's the Defender-class cruiser at number 7. We're moving on to number 6 with a Clone Wars entry. It's going to be the core ships. This one, you know, you saw these at the Battle of Geonosis trying to take off. They're pretty iconic for you know, for being canon and for Clone Wars era stuff. Separatists don't have that many ships that they can pull from, but this one is a good one. You've got 2 different versions. You've got the battle sphere, and then there's the core ship variant. So, like, you know, that gives you, you know, fits perfectly into Armada. You've got your, you know, your cheaper version, your more expensive version. You could have more of the command and transport version versus more of the combat-oriented version. Cool stuff, and would fit the bill, I think, for a medium ship for the Separatists pretty well. The game of Star Wars Armada tends to struggle with a lack of medium-sized ships. So many ships are either very small or very, very, very large, and there's this huge contrast between the small capitals and the large capitals. You just don't see that much in the medium era, you know, in that kind of design space. And so anytime I have an excuse to see another medium ship in the game, I think it's a very cool. So I give it bonus points for that. So that's number 6 with the core ship. And you're going to see more medium ships on this list. Moving on with number 5, the Cantwell-class Arrestor cruiser. Another potential medium ship for the Empire. This one was based off of old concept art drawn by Colin Cantwell, one of the original artists for Star Wars. Created many of the designs that you know, that were, you know, part of the movies getting made. You see a lot of this stuff in the early art books. A lot of stuff that didn't initially get used for the original Star Wars productions has been showing up in recent media, whether it be TV shows and or movies. This particular ship was initially shown in canon in Solo. Now, it was part of a deleted scene, but it was also still in the final edit, but just kind of in the background. When basically at the beginning, when Han Solo's on Corellia and he's going through an Imperial checkpoint, you can see like a Imperial propaganda playing, a little holo vid, and then you see some Imperial troops marching, and then you see one of these guys flying in the background. Later was supposed to be that he was serving on board one of these ships and had an accident, but actually saved, you know, did some, you know, flyboy heroics and got himself bumped down to infantry and so on and so forth. But that whole scene didn't make it into the movie, but it's available for deleted scenes. But what this one really started to get popular was in Andor Season 1, when we actually got to see it in action in all of its glory, with a really powerful tractor beam. Kind of serves as not being as powerful as a Star Destroyer, but still being able there to do the policing, the enforcing. This isn't like the fridge, go to the outer, you know, the outer realms and try to, you know, wage war on rebels and stuff like that. This one's more like of a police craft almost, it seems like, and it would kind of work. I mean, tractor beams aren't fun in Star Wars Armada, so they could try to find another way to make it work. Maybe it would work really well against squadrons. I would love it if it would lock down squadron movement. As a personal biased player who loves to mess with my opponent's squadrons or de-incentivize them from coming anywhere near me, I think this could be a really cool one for that. So I'd love to see this one in game. That was number 5. Moving on to number 4. It is our stealth ship from the Clone Wars. Anakin Skywalker should have actually come out initially, instead of being a print-and-play commander that was superbly broken, to being a print-and-play commander that was just okay. We should have had him on board here, you know, because this was a ship that he took the charge on and went up against that blockade. And look, it was the IPV-2 Charlie stealth ship. This could have also pulled as a dual faction ship, a pack that could have worked for both the Republic and the Empire. You had one of these in the Tarkin book. The Carrion Spike was, you know, they used those Stygium crystals to do the cloaking. And Tarkin, of course, had one of those. You could have used it, you know, had it made use of tokens and things like that. So it works well with Tarkin, and it could have synergized really well with Anakin Skywalker. Could have synergized really well with Tarkin for the Republic and the Empire if you did a multi-faction pack. It could have been a cool way to do it. Cloaking on this one would have been interesting, though, because a lot of people have a lot of different ideas on how you cloak, and it's hard to really replicate that in game without it being just completely, you know, game breaking. So my thought is always that you don't actually cloak. You can start the battle cloaked, and you can decloak once, but you can't, and it has to be before a certain turn. It has to be like before turn 3, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it, or by turn 3, or otherwise you're not going to be able to do it. So you can't just stay cloaked the whole time and have it be a lifeboat or something like that. And maybe it would count as a flotilla, so you couldn't put a commander on it and just try to fly away, and you know, something like that. I don't know exactly how they would have done it. This also would be a great opportunity to bring an Anakin Skywalker officer on there. So instead of just having him as a commander, then you could have him like, you know, if you can't have Anakin leading the whole battle as a commander, maybe he could just take charge of this one ship as an officer and do something crazy and just do the sacrifice play or the really gutsy maneuver. You know, it would have been fun. It could have been a really fun expansion, but it would have been tricky to see how cloaking ends up working. And they might have even just said, you know what, we'll just say you decloaked before the battle started. And maybe even give it a scatter. Maybe a one-time, maybe a title that lets it scatter one time and then it's exhausted. Like you get a once per game scatter. That would have been actually pretty cool. That might have been a, you know, a less than crazy way to simulate cloaking in the game, or just let you. I mean, we already have so many ways to kind of simulate cloaking with hyperspace assault and Radis and things that can kind of jump in, have it kind of work that way, possibly. A lot of different ways to do it. So anyway, that's the IPV-2 Charlie stealth ship. Moving on to number 3. Well, let me know what you guys think are in the top 3. Let me know what you guys think are in the top 3 in the comments section below. Also, jump in our Discord. We got links down in the video description below. Have you joined our Discord yet? And keep the discussion going there. If you do join, be sure to check out the Roles channel, because there's a lot of games that I talk about. We have a lot of channels in our Discord, but I don't want to inundate you with like a million channels. So there's different roles. There's a general. You can just get some of the general gaming channels. There's X-Wing channels, Armada channels, Legion channels, GW if you're Warhammer player, all kinds of stuff, like a lot of different channels, Star Trek Into the Unknown channels, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So whatever games you're interested in, there's different like roles you can click, and it'll automatically open up those channels for you, and then you only see what you want to see, and chat with the communities you want to chat with. All right, so that's my little admin stuff. Let's move on to number 3. The Dorian gunship, aka the Cull-class gunship. Like this one was in the original trilogy. It's got to show up at some point, right? Or we thought. This is definitely a fan favorite. This is one that I've been pushing for forever. It would also made another cool new flotilla option for the Rebellion. They're so small that it would be hard to justify these as a small ship. Could have been a combat flotilla. Again, does not have to have scatter. Flotilla doesn't have to mean that you have scatter. Flotilla just means that you're multiple ships on a base, and you follow special rules as far as bumping. Like you can't inflict damage on somebody else after a bump unless they are also a flotilla. So again, yeah, flotilla of a Dorian gunship flotilla would have been really, really cool. A combat flotilla. Again, it doesn't even have to mean that they're cheap. They might have been an expensive combat flotilla. I don't know. There's so many different ways they could have worked this, but it could have been fun. It could have been fun if they were forward-facing. I think that would have been a cool option. You don't want them to have too much broadsides because then you have crazy possible Akbar abuse. But I would think they would have worked well. And also, if they're a flotilla, you're limited to only 2 of them, so if they happen to have a very strong punch, you don't have to worry about an MSU of all Dorian gunships. Although, there's lots of ways around that. They could have put a special title on there that allow it to not, count towards the flotilla cap or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting ways they could have done this one. But I would have loved to have seen what the Dorian gunship would have looked like under FFG. Moving on to number 2. Number 2, we saw it come to canon fruition in Star Wars Rebels. It's the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser, a.k.a., as it is officially known in the Empire, the Imperial Support Vessel. But most of you know them as Dreadnoughts or the Katana Fleet. It's not necessarily exactly the same as it was in Legends, but we do have Dreadnoughts in the canon universe of Star Wars. In Thrawn's 7th Fleet, he had these, and I thought it was so fitting that they included them in Grand Admiral Thrawn's fleet because they were initially in the Heir to the Empire trilogy in the 2nd book, and the whole Katana Fleet thing, it was a big deal. Both the Rebels had some and the Empire had some, and a lot of people have always envisioned these as being a Rebel or Empire ship, like a multi-faction ship. I don't think if this would have happened under Fantasy Flight, I don't think they would have done these as a multi-faction ship. I don't think they would have done a Legends era Dreadnought. Although they could have, and it would have been very cool. It would have been very cool to do this. I think what they would have done is released this as a canon ship. It would have been the Imperial Support Vessel, aka the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser, and I think it would have come out just for the Empire at first. And it would have probably come with somebody else that is prominent in Thrawn's fleet from the season finale of Star Wars, or the series finale of Star Wars Rebels. I think it could have come with a commander, Jalad Paleon, would have worked out perfectly for it. And then down the road, if they get the approval, then they could come back and say, oh, let's do a multi-faction pack. Let's do a Katana Fleet version of this. Maybe they repaint it a little bit. Maybe do a 2-pack or something like that, and have it synergized with Garm Bel Iblis and stuff like that. You've already got so many things in Armada to make it work as the Katana Fleet. I'm sure they could have done that eventually. But at first, realistically, I think they would have had to have stuck to the canon implementation of it. But the interesting thing is, as time goes by, Disney's doing more and more stuff, especially with Ahsoka bringing back Heir to the Empire. I think it's, and again, by the time, if you're watching this in the future and looking back, who knows what will end up happening with the movies and the conclusion of the Thrawn storyline and all of the, Ahsoka Season 2, if we're going to actually see a Katana Fleet. Who knows what we'll see? Will they recanonize Garm Bel Iblis and all of this stuff? I don't know. I imagine there's going to be some things that they redo and some things that they don't do as it comes to kind of redoing Heir to the Empire. But again, this would have been a great pick for Star Wars Armada. Moving on to number 1. Have you guessed what my number 1 pick is yet? Because I'll give you 3 seconds to pause, type it in, let me know. 3, 2, 1. Number 1 pick. Yeah, I'm sure you guessed it. I don't think it was any secret here. It's the Lucrehulk. Look, it's one of the most iconic ships in all of the Clone Wars. Maybe the most iconic ship in all of the Clone Wars. The Lucrehulk is absolutely something that has to happen. And by all reports, it was certainly on the drawing board. FFG did have plans to do the Lucrehulk. But how would it have been? Would it have been 2 side-by-side? Would it have been a huge ship or a large ship? Would it have been, if it was a huge ship, would it have been 2 side-by-side bases, or just one extra long one in the middle? I don't know. I mean, it's possible. My bet was always that they would have done a 2, side-by-side 2 bases and done the Lucrehulk in that manner. But it's also curious to me how they would have made it work, because of the fact that in the first 4 Separatist ships we've got, we have solid carriers already. So it's not like the Separatists needed a carrier. What they actually needed, more so than a carrier, was a commander that favored bombers or a carrier or a big squadron strike. And I think Newt Gunray might have been a good option for that, with all the vulture droids that they had. That could have definitely worked. And there's plenty of other Separatist commanders that I'd love to see them do, and to give bombers an option, or to see, vulture droids have an option, maybe anti-squadron play from one and pro-squadron play from another. But, this is one of the biggest things that the Clone Wars needed, beyond just ships, was new commanders to give them different playstyles and different synergies. One of the biggest problems with the Separatists right now is, out of the 6 commanders they have, 3 of them are doing kind of the same thing, that they're ship to ship, dice mitigation, kind of, dice help on ship to ship shots. And I'm like, okay, well, that's half of your commanders are all focusing on a very similar, but not identical, but very similar playstyle. And there's really nobody that helps, if you want to bring a lot of squadrons and throw them at your opponent. Grievous works with squadrons a little bit, but it's in a defensive way, not a squadron attack kind of way. So it's a weird thing. He's hoping that you have squadrons die, and I'm like, what if I wanted to have my squadrons live? This might have been the expansion to make that happen. So that is my list of top 10 ships we never got for Star Wars Armada. But who knows what the future holds? Maybe Armada will get brought back by some other company some way. Maybe Restoration Games or something will get the ability to redo it. But I'm not holding my breath for that. But there's still plenty of Armada to play. I've been playing 600-point formats lately, and still playing in the classic 400 too. There's so many fleets I have not even run yet with just the ships I have. So there's no end in sight for me for Star Wars Armada. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and out of this world to help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you soon. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.